Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. We're currently standing on the shores of Lake Morena, a man-made reservoir in San Diego County. When this reservoir was created in the early 1900s, it may have led to one of the worst disasters in San Diego history. You see, when they created this reservoir, the city of San Diego wanted to fill it as fast as possible. So they did what any sensible government would do. They hired a rainmaker. The rains that would come, whether they were brought on by the rainmaker or just purely natural, would devastate the area, causing the collapse of a dam and the deaths of at least 20 people. So today we're going to be taking a look at the story of when San Diego hired Charles Hatfield, Rainmaker. Lake Morena is about 35 miles from San Diego, in the mountains east of the city. This is one of those places that people who know about it are not going to like that I'm showing it, as it's so peaceful and hardly anyone is out here. Construction of the Morena Dam, which would create the reservoir in front of us, began in 1896, but there were so many problems with it, they stopped work in 1898 and didn't restart until 1909. The construction was finally finished in 1912. This area sees some of the highest rainfall in San Diego County, so they thought the reservoir would fill pretty quickly. However, there was a long drought in Southern California in the early 1900s, and the reservoir never got more than a third full. Well, until 1916, that is. Charles Hatfield was born in Fort Scott, Kansas on July 15, 1875. At 10 years old, his family moved to San Diego. As a young man, Hatfield studied pluviculture, or rainmaking, and began coming up with his own secret formula, eventually settling on a mixture of 23 chemicals in large galvanized evaporating tanks that he claimed attracted rain. Hatfield called himself a moisture accelerator. I just noticed this bird walking around off to my right, and it kind of reminded me of Jurassic Park. I believe this is a heron, but I really don't know my bird species to say what kind of heron. But I guess it doesn't matter as long as it's not a velociraptor. So Charles Hatfield began running ads in newspapers advertising his rainmaking skills, and in 1904, some Los Angeles area ranchers hired him for $50, and they were so happy with the results, they ended up paying him $100. He had some other successes as well, but in 1906, he was given a contract for $10,000 to create rain in Canada's Yukon Territory, but was unsuccessful. He slipped out of the area, collecting only $1,100 for expenses. In 1915, with frustrations growing over how slowly this reservoir was filling up, the San Diego City Council approached Hatfield about creating rain to fill this place up. Eventually, a fee of $10,000 was agreed upon, payable once the reservoir was full. Unfortunately for Hatfield, nothing was ever put into writing, and he put his faith into their verbal agreement. But we'll get back to that in just a little bit. He built a tower out here and began working around New Year's in 1916. Before we get too far into this, I should say that rainmaking by cloud seeding is a real thing, though there are often mixed results. The United States military even tried to weaponize it during the Vietnam War. Cloud seeding didn't come about until the 1940s, though. The validity of these earlier rainmakers is a bit more questionable. That being said, heavy rains began throughout San Diego County on January 5th, and they grew heavier each day. By the 10th, it was really coming down. And by the 17th, the San Diego River went over its banks and would grow to a width of about a mile. For reference, nowadays the riverbed is maybe 600 feet across at its widest. It rained almost non-stop for 2 weeks. Flooding destroyed bridges, caused landslides, stopped train service, and took out the phone system. The only way to reach San Diego from outside the area was by boat. 2 people were killed by the Tijuana River flooding, and 2 dams miles from here, the Sweetwater Dam and the Lower Otay Dam, overflowed. While all of this was going on, the local newspapers began running stories about the Rainmaker, but since no reporter could have made it out here, the stories were just wild speculation. And we are finally at the lake. It's actually pretty low right now, even with some recent heavy rains to the area. This reservoir is purely filled by local runoff. No water is brought in from the outside to it. Let's climb up and get a look from a little bit higher up. I haven't seen any boats out on the lake today. I'm not sure if it's because the water level is too low or maybe it's just too cold out. We can't see it from here, but the dam is in this direction. Usually you'll see a few people out here fishing, but nothing today. To show how low the water is, here's the lake bed loop trail. And as we can see, it's nowhere near the lake right now. This boat ramp being nowhere near the water is an even better indicator of how low the lake currently is. I just looked it up and it's currently 24% full. It's low on purpose though. Because of the large surface area of the lake, there's a lot of evaporation, so they like to store the water at a different reservoir instead. This reservoir rarely gets full. When this was built, it was designed to provide the city of San Diego's main water supply, but in 1939, the city began importing water from the Colorado River, and the reservoir took on a backup role. Now it only provides about 3% of the city's water. But that brings us back to Hatfield, because in 1916, this was supposed to be the city's main water supply. The rain finally stopped on January 20th, but when it stopped, this reservoir was still not full, and Hatfield hadn't secured his $10,000. So he kept on with his work of rainmaking. 2 days later, the rain resumed, and then the heaviest rains came. And that's the Morena Dam in the distance in front of us. And you could tell by the vegetation here that this has not been underwater in quite some time. Long before there was a lake here, this area was home to the Kumeyaay people, and it looks like there could be some morteros or grinding stones that could have been used by the Kumeyaay over here. They would have used these type of boulders to grind acorns and seeds, and over time it would leave indentations on the rocks. Getting a closer look, these could be morteros, but these could also be natural. I'm not 100% sure on these. During the second set of rains, with the area already soaked from 2 weeks of rain prior, the damage was catastrophic. At 4 p.m. on January 27, 1916, the first evidence that the Lower Otay Dam was in real trouble was seen. At 5:05 p.m., it began to crumble.
We've seen the spot where the Rainmaker worked. Now we're going to head about an hour from here and see where the dam collapsed.
Here's our first look at the Lower Otay Reservoir in the Savage Dam, located where the Lower Otay Dam once stood. Let's go get a closer look. The Lower Otay Dam was a 125-foot high rock-filled dam that was built in 1897. The reservoir was already overflowing from the first 2 weeks of rains, so when the rains came back even stronger after only a couple of days, the dam couldn't take it. It looks like we're going to come across some dangerous cliffs. It says to stop, but this is clearly a trail right here, so we'll keep going. The only reason the Sweetwater Dam nearby didn't collapse too is the water actually broke through the ground next to the dam, so the water ended up going around the dam. With the dam collapsing, of course the area in its flood path took the worst of the damage from the rains, but the rains were pretty devastating all throughout San Diego County. Up in northern San Diego County, the adobe bell tower at the Paula Mission Outpost, which dated back to the 1700s, collapsed from the rain. We should have a good view of the dam right up ahead. The current dam is named for Hiram Newton Savage, the city engineer who supervised its construction. And this is where the Lower Otay Dam stood until January 27th, 1916. We're not too far from the international border, and Border Patrol helicopters are patrolling the area, so I'm trying to film in between their pass-bys. I don't know how well you can see it. I'll use an arrow or something to point to it, but it looks like there's a piece of the original dam still on the canyon wall. When the Lower Otay Dam failed, a wall of water said to be at least 40 feet high rushed down this canyon, destroying everything in its path as it headed towards San Diego Bay. A city official named R.C. Woost had been on the dam when it started to fail, and luckily he made it off in time. He was also able to dispatch 4 men down the valley to warn people that the dam was going to fail, and that likely saved countless lives. However, there was a colony of Japanese immigrants living in the valley that were fairly isolated and didn't get the warning. The next morning, a number of Japanese boats were searching the bay for their dead. There is also a memorial to the Japanese who died in the dam collapse in San Diego's Mount Hope Cemetery, listing the names of the known dead. The exact death toll from the dam collapse is unknown, though it's generally believed to be around 20. At the time, it was the 5th worst dam disaster in United States history, but since then, it's fallen to 10th place. The floods were also devastating to Tijuana, Mexico. As for Hatfield, he learned of the dam collapse 3 days after it happened. He was also told a group was organizing to come up there and lynch him. Hatfield and his brother walked back to San Diego, taking 2 days to get there. And they weren't kidding about these unstable cliffs. I would hate to fall down there. Even though it rained all over Southern California, Hatfield took credit for the rains, but didn't feel responsible for the damages, saying the city should have been better prepared. I'm heading a little higher up to get a better view of the reservoir, and it looks like we may have a Border Patrol camera watching us. I guess they get an early look at this video. With no written contract, the city refused to pay Hatfield. They did offer that if he would accept liability for the damages, which were estimated to be about $3.5 million, then they would pay him. But he of course turned that down. Hatfield eventually sued the city, and the lawsuit went on until 1938, when the court decided that the rain was an act of God, meaning Hatfield wouldn't get his money. This whole thing made Hatfield famous, leading to a number of other big rain-making jobs afterwards, though when the Great Depression came about, he had to return to work as a sewing machine salesman to make ends meet. Hatfield's story inspired the play The Rainmaker, which was turned into a film in 1956. He was even invited to the premiere in Hollywood. Charles Hatfield died on January 12, 1958, taking his secret formula to the grave. And whether he was responsible for the rains or not, he will be forever linked with what happened here. So that's our look at the story of Charles Hatfield, the Rainmaker. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.